Who is someone who saved you once, but later became the person you needed saving from? I used to think that the night he saved my life would be the moment I owed him everything. You know how people talk about guardian angels showing up at the worst moment? That's exactly how he appeared in mine. I was 22, broke, newly kicked out of my parents' house, sitting on the edge of a bridge after losing my job and my girlfriend in the same week. I wasn't planning anything definite, but the thoughts were dark enough that being there felt like an invitation to something I wasn't ready for. Then he just approached, like he'd been watching, or waiting, or maybe just passing by, though the way he spoke to me made it sound like he knew exactly what was going through my head. He didn't judge, he didn't preach. He sat right next to me and told me he'd been there too. He said the exact right words in the exact right tone, and somehow, he convinced me to get off that edge and walk with him. He took me to a diner, paid for my food, listened to my whole messy story, and told me I wasn't a burden. He told me I mattered. And when I realized I had nowhere to sleep, he offered his couch. Just like that. A stranger who saved me, fed me, sheltered me. For the first couple weeks, he was honestly the kindest person I'd ever met. He kept saying things like, "You're safe here," and "I know how to take care of people like you." I didn't even question what people like you meant because I was so desperate to feel safe that I would have accepted a half-rotting barn if it came with a roof. He helped me get a new job. He gave me a set of his old clothes. He even cheered me on when I went to therapy for the first time. I remember thinking, how did I get this lucky? I was convinced the universe had given me a second chance wrapped in this quiet, compassionate man. But I missed the small things at first. The kinds of things you only recognize in hindsight when all the pieces finally click, like how he'd always insist on driving me everywhere, even when the place was walking distance, or how he'd take my phone to update the software and somehow forget to give it back until the next morning, or how he'd get this weirdly disappointed expression whenever I talked about meeting new people. But whenever I noticed something odd, I'd just remind myself, he saved your life, he cares about you. The shift happened gradually, like a slow suffocation you don't notice until you're gasping. It started when I wanted to move out. I told him I found a room for rent near my job and I'd probably move within the month. He got quiet, still and cold in a way I had never seen. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes and he said, "You're not ready to live on your own, you're still fragile." I laughed it off, thinking he was trying to protect me, but he doubled down. "You don't make good decisions yet. You need structure." That "yet" sat wrong with me. After that, he started monitoring everything: my work schedule, my spending, my friends. If I wanted to go anywhere, he'd ask, "Who will be there? When will you be home? Why do you need to go?" It wasn't yelling. It wasn't violence. It was concern, weaponized concern, concern sharpened into control. The next red flag I ignored was when he admitted he'd followed me to therapy once, to make sure the place looked legitimate. He said it so casually, like it was normal to tail someone because you care. When I reacted, he told me, "I saved you that night because I saw someone worth saving. Don't make me regret it." That's when the guilt started. He didn't have to say, I owed him, his eyes did the talking. Every boundary I tried to set felt like betrayal. Every step toward independence felt like I was kicking the person who pulled me out of the dark. The real breaking point came months later. I'd been quietly saving money. I found a studio. I signed the lease, and I decided to tell him the night before I moved out, naively thinking he'd be proud. Instead, he locked the door, stood between me and the exit, and said, "I didn't save you so you could abandon me. I saved you because you needed someone to guide you. You think you can survive without me. I made you stable. I can take that stability away." It wasn't anger in his voice. It was certainty, calm, chilling certainty. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. He hadn't saved me to help me. He had saved me to own me. My rock bottom had been his opportunity. I don't remember exactly how I got past him. Me memory of that night is spotty, like trauma blurred out the frames. But I do remember running barefoot down the street with my backpack, calling my therapist who told me to come to her office immediately. And I remember the police saying there wasn't enough evidence to do anything since he hadn't technically hurt me. But here's the twist months after I moved into my studio. He sent me a long message. Not hateful, not angry, worse grieving. "You were happiest when you needed me." He wrote, "I don't know who you are now." That message still haunts me more than anything else, because it made me realize that in his mind, he wasn't the villain. He truly believed he was my hero. He believed saving me gave him the right to reshape me. And there's something uniquely horrifying about being controlled by someone who thinks they're doing it out of love. Some threats aren't born from hatred. Some threats are born from gratitude, twisted into dependency. And sometimes the person who pulls you from the edge doesn't want you to walk away. They want you to stay where they can keep you forever, one step from falling. I don't talk about the fire much anymore. Not because I'm afraid of the memory itself, but because of everything that happened afterward, the part nobody would believe if I told them, the part where the man who saved my life slowly became the person I feared more than the flames. I was 19 when my apartment building caught fire in the middle of the night. I woke up choking on smoke, stumbling blindly toward what I thought was the door, only to realize later I'd been walking straight toward a collapsing hallway. The firefighter said I was seconds from dying, but I wasn't saved by a firefighter. I was saved by Daniel, the neighbor. 2 floors down, the guy who always wore headphones and barely spoke. The one I assumed hated everyone. He crashed through my door, literally kicked it in, grabbed my arm, and dragged me down the stairs like I weighed nothing. We were coughing half blind. He shielded me with his jacket. He threw me onto his back when I couldn't breathe anymore. He got me out. I owe him that. I owe him my life. And in that moment, with my lungs burning and ash in my eyelashes, I thought, this is the kind of person you trust forever. That belief didn't last long. The hospital kept me for 2 nights. Daniel visited both days. At first, it felt sweet, like he genuinely cared whether I lived or died. He brought me drinks, sat quietly beside my bed, told me little jokes when he thought I looked scared. I thought he was just shy. I thought maybe we'd become friends after this, the way people bond after surviving something traumatic together. But on the second night, he said something strange, something small but wrong. He looked at the burns on my arms, minor ones, and said, "If I hadn't been there, you'd be gone. Don't forget that." I thought it was just trauma talking. Maybe he needed reassurance. Maybe he needed to feel that saving me mattered. I didn't realize he meant it as a promise. When I was discharged, he insisted I stay in his apartment until I fully recovered. I told him I'd go to a hotel or stay with my cousin, but he kept repeating, "You're not ready. You're not steady on your feet yet. I know you. You're careless." The way he said "I know you" felt wrong, like he'd decided we had a deeper relationship than we did. But I was shaky, exhausted, and still coughing up soot. Letting someone take care of me felt easier than fighting. The first few days were normal. He cooked for me, helped change my bandages, even set up a little futon in his living room. But then little things started feeling off. Like how he'd get irritated if I made my own tea instead of letting him do it, or how he'd ask where I was going, even when I was just walking to the bathroom, or how he always locked the front door no matter what time of day it was. I told myself it was just protectiveness. He saw me nearly die after all. Maybe he was scared, but protectiveness shouldn't feel like surveillance. One afternoon, I decided to walk downstairs to get some air. When I came back up, he was waiting by the door, jaw-tight hands, shaking like I'd cheated on him or something. He said, "You didn't tell me you were leaving." I told him I didn't think I needed permission. He didn't yell, but the way he stared at me, cold, wounded, confused, it felt like I'd broken some unspoken rule. That night, while pretending to sleep, I heard him standing over me, just breathing, watching, not touching, just making sure I wasn't going anywhere. I remember feeling terrified but also guilty, like I'd done something wrong by wanting to breathe on my own. The real break came the day I told him my cousin found me a new place to stay. I thought he'd be happy for me, proud, even. Instead, he went quiet for a full minute before saying, "You're leaving after everything. I didn't risk my life for you to walk away." I told him saving me didn't mean he owned me. His face twisted into something I'd never seen. Not anger, but disbelief. Like I'd shattered some fantasy he'd been building. "You were helpless," he said. "You still are. You'd be dead without me." I'm the reason you're breathing right now. You should be grateful." The word grateful felt like a chain around my neck. That night I packed quietly while he slept. I planned to slip out before sunrise. But when I opened the door, he was already awake in the hallway, fully dressed, like he knew I'd try to escape. He blocked the exit with one arm and whispered, "Why are you doing this to me?" To him, I didn't argue. I just ducked under his arm and ran barefoot, carrying nothing but my phone and the clothes I was wearing. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the expression. I knew he'd have that wounded, betrayed look that somehow always made me feel like the villain. For months afterward, he sent messages, not threats, not insults. Worse pity. "You're not strong enough to be alone. You're acting reckless again. You'll come back when the world hurts you. I'm the only one who understands you." I blocked him everywhere, but sometimes I still hear his words when I try to fall asleep. He saved me from a fire, and then he tried to keep me in another kind of burning one, where he decided the temperature, the oxygen, the exits. People imagine danger as something loud, violent, obvious, but sometimes the danger is quiet, tender, grateful, the kind that tells you you're safe while building a cage around you, one careful act of kindness at a time. And sometimes the worst thing isn't almost dying, it's surviving into someone else's fantasy. I still remember the exact sound my son made when he fell into the lake. A sharp splash followed by that awful frantic silence children make when they're too shocked to scream. One moment he was feeding ducks, the next, he slipped on the mossy boards and vanished under the surface. I froze. Not because I didn't care. God, no. But because the water was icy and it all happened so fast, my brain felt like it misfired. Before I could even fully understand what I was seeing, a stranger sprinted past me, dove into the water, and dragged my little boy out like he was rescuing his own blood. His name was Aaron. I hugged my son so tightly he cried from the pressure, but all I could do was whisper, "Thank you," over and over at this man dripping lake water onto the wooden deck. He smiled at me with this humble, bashful expression, and for days I thought he was one of the kindest souls I'd ever met. I didn't know then that saving my child was the opening move, the first thread in a web he'd been waiting years to spin. He checked in a few days later, a polite text asking if my son was okay. Then he dropped by with a small toy car, just to cheer him up. Then he offered to help install child safety gates around the house. Every time he was warm, gentle, considerate, almost too considerate. But when someone saves your kid from drowning, you ignore your instincts. My son loved him, trusted him. That's what made everything harder to see. The first red flag came during one of his visits. My son asked me for juice, and before I could move, Aaron said, "It's okay, buddy, I'll get it." I laughed it off. He was just being sweet, but the look he gave me when he handed my son the cup felt evaluating, like he was comparing us and deciding he came out on top. Another came when I mentioned calling my mother for advice about something. He said, "Why didn't you ask me?" So casually, it took a second to register that he wasn't joking. But the biggest one happened after he offered to babysit while I ran a quick errand. I returned earlier than expected and found them on the couch, my son leaning against Aaron's shoulder, watching cartoons, and Aaron stroking his hair with this soft, possessive look in his eyes. Not affectionate possessive. When he saw me standing there, he didn't flinch. He just smiled, like he was proud, like I'd walked in on a scene I should be grateful for. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself trauma from the near drowning was making me paranoid, but paranoia doesn't explain the voicemail. It came a week later, late at night, when I was exhausted and half asleep. His voice soft, steady, almost tender. "You know you're overwhelmed. You don't have to do this alone. Let me help you. Let me help both of you. It's okay if you can't handle everything." I didn't call back. The next morning, he showed up uninvited. He wasn't angry. That was the terrifying part. He knocked like a friend, stepped inside like family, and talked like someone who genuinely believed I owed him a space in my life. He said things like, "You should trust me by now. He needs a father figure. I've been here for him in ways no one else has. You freeze under pressure, I don't." It hit me. Then he wasn't talking about helping me. He was talking about replacing me. I told him to leave. He just smiled sadly, like I was a stubborn child refusing medicine. Then he bent down and kissed my son on the head before walking out the door. My hands were still shaking. Hours later, that night I checked the security camera I'd installed ages ago but never used. What I saw made my stomach twist. He'd been stopping by my front door on days he hadn't knocked, just standing there looking at the house. Sometimes for minutes, watching, waiting. That was the moment I realized the man who saved my son believed that rescue entitled him to ownership, that pulling my child from the water made him the better parent, the more capable protector. And the scariest part wasn't that he thought it, it was that a small broken piece of me, the part still haunted by almost losing my baby, had believed he was the hero of our story too. I changed the locks the next morning. I reported the incident. I told my neighbors. It took weeks for my heart to stop jumping every time I heard a footstep outside the window. He never came back, but sometimes, when my son falls asleep on my shoulder and I watch him breathing softly, I think about the look Aaron wore when he brushed the hair out of his eyes. That wasn't the look of a hero. It was the look of a man who thought God had hand-delivered him someone else's child, someone else's life, someone else's purpose. He saved my son, and then he tried to steal the story. I was 22 when I met the man who saved my life. I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean he literally pulled me back from a ledge. I'd gone through a breakup, lost my job, and was drowning in debt from school. I never even finished. I wasn't thinking clearly that night. I wasn't thinking at all. I was standing on a bridge, railing in the rain, convincing myself it would be quick. Then this man, Jonah, walked up quietly behind me. No shouting, no dramatics. He just spoke softly, like he'd been waiting for me. He said, "I've been where you are. It doesn't fix anything." Something in his voice hit me harder than any lecture. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. So I stepped down, I sat on the cold cement and cried until my throat hurt. He stayed with me the whole time over the next few weeks. He checked in constantly. Texts in the morning. "How are you feeling today?" Calls at night. "Have you eaten?" He made sure I got a therapist appointment. He even helped me update my resume. At first, it felt like he was the only thing keeping me stitched together. Everyone else in my life had faded out, got too busy, got too uncomfortable, didn't know how to help Jonah, didn't flinch. He never got tired of listening. He said I was stronger than anyone knew. He said he believed in me. I thought he was the first good thing to happen to me in years. But slowly, and I mean slowly, so slowly I didn't see it happening. His help became something else. He started getting upset if I didn't answer right away. He said he worried something had happened. If I went more than a few hours without texting, he'd show up at my apartment just to check. At first, I told myself it was his trauma talking. He told me his ex had ghosted him years ago. He told me he had abandonment issues, so I excused it. Then he started correcting my decisions. If I wanted to apply for a certain job, he'd say, "That's not good for your mental health." If I wanted to hang out with certain friends, he'd say, "They weren't there when you needed them. Why give them another chance?" If I mentioned trying dating again, he'd say, "You're not stable enough yet." Everything sounded helpful until I realized everything was meant to keep me dependent. He erased every bridge I tried to rebuild, and the worst part is, people kept telling me how lucky I was to have him. He saved your life. They'd say, "You owe him so much." Owe him. That word stuck in my throat like a stone. Because the more I owed him, the more he collected. He started coming over unannounced. Just to make sure you're okay. He started telling me who I should and shouldn't talk to. "I'm just protecting you from bad influences." He started reading my messages, just to be safe. He started telling people we were dating, we weren't. I never said yes, I never even hinted at it. But he told his friends I was his girlfriend, and they congratulated him. When I confronted him, terrified, shaking, he said, "You wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for me. Of course we're more than friends." That was the moment something inside me flipped. He didn't save me, he claimed me. The thing nobody warns you about saviors is that some of them only want to save you if they get to hold the leash afterward. I tried to pull away gently, stopped answering as fast, stopped accepting every offer of help. But the less I needed him, the more unstable he became. He'd cry, he'd apologize, then blame me for making him upset, then beg me not to abandon him the way everyone else did. It felt like emotional quicksand. Every movement dragged me deeper. He told my therapist he was my emergency contact and tried to sit in my sessions. He reported one of my friends to HR at her job because he said she was influencing me negatively. He even called my mother pretending to be my boyfriend and told her I was relapsing emotionally. I realized something terrifying. He was building a version of me that only existed under his control, so I did something drastic. I moved. Not cities, states. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anyone who might tell him. I got a new number, new job, new apartment. I left a note taped to my old mailbox that said simply, "Saving me doesn't mean you own me." It took him 3 months to find a way to contact me again. He sent an email, long, rambling, angry, then begging, then angry again. I blocked it. He made another, blocked, and another. Eventually, they stopped. The strange thing is, I don't hate him. I don't even think he was evil. I think he was lonely, broken, and saw me as something he could fix to prove he wasn't a failure. But when I healed faster than he wanted me to, he panicked. He needed me to need him more than he wanted me to be okay. He saved my life once, and then he suffocated it. But sometimes the real act of being saved isn't when someone pulls you off the ledge. It's when you learn how to step away from people who build ledges around you. I honestly don't know how to explain the whiplash of going from "this man saved my life" to "this man terrifies me more than the person he rescued me from." But here we go. A few years ago, I was trying to get out of a relationship with a guy who had slowly slid from charming to controlling to outright explosive. It wasn't a snap change. It was tiny restrictions that piled up until I couldn't breathe. I tried to leave quietly, but of course he found out. And the night everything fell apart, he cornered me in my apartment screaming, throwing my stuff, threatening everything from my job to my family. I bolted out into the hallway barefoot and crying, and that was when my neighbor, let's call him Evan, came out of his unit. He'd heard the commotion and asked if I was okay, and my ex tried to storm after me, but Evan blocked him. Literally blocked him with a calmness that felt godlike in the moment. He told my ex the police were on their way and that he needed to back off. My ex fled, and Evan guided me into his apartment to sit down, breathe, drink water, all the wholesome savior stuff you'd expect. That night, he helped me pack some essentials. He even drove me to a friend's house. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I actually cried because someone finally helped without wanting something in return. Joke was on me. He wanted something, just not that night, not right away. At first, Evan kept checking in on me, just to be sure. He'd ask if I'd eaten, if I'd slept, if I needed help changing locks or dealing with paperwork. He was incredibly attentive, the kind of person you feel guilty not appreciating. My friends loved him for saving me. My family kept thanking him like he was some angel who dropped out of the ceiling. Then the tone started shifting. He started ending every check-in message with "Where are you?" or "Who are you with?" He said he just worried, but it felt too familiar. Whenever I didn't respond quickly, he'd text again and again and again, escalating from gentle concern to passive-aggressive, "Guess you're busy," to "I hope you're not making reckless decisions again." Again, he began showing up places: the grocery store, my work parking lot, my friend's house. Coincidences at first, but after the fourth coincidence, my stomach started doing that old panic flip I thought I left behind with my ex. One time, he even showed up at a cafe where I was meeting a coworker and walked right up to us like he was my parent, and I was grounded. "I was worried," he said, staring down my coworker. "Like, how dare you be here?" I tried creating distance. I stopped telling him where I'd be. I delayed responses. I told him gently that I appreciated everything he did, but I needed space to rebuild my independence. That was when he dropped the line that made my blood turn to ice. "I literally saved your life. You don't get to shut me out now." He said it like it was obvious, like I owed him access, attention, emotional dependence. Like rescuing me from a burning building meant I had to live in his. He grew bitter fast. He'd leave notes on my door, things like, "You shouldn't be alone right now," and "I'm the only one who actually cares about you." One said, "You're repeating patterns," which creeped me out because I never told him anything about my past except the night my ex snapped. Eventually, he started implying that other people in my life were using me, lying to me, filling my head with nonsense. I'd heard this script before. It was the exact same psychological chokehold my ex used. That realization was the moment I stopped seeing him as the man who saved me and started seeing him as another threat who hid behind good intentions. The final straw. He let himself into my apartment. He'd memorized the code the day he helped me move my suitcase. I came home to him sitting on my couch, lights off, waiting. Not violent, not yelling, just waiting. Smiling like this was perfectly normal. I was worried, he said again. "You've been distant." That night, I didn't argue. I didn't challenge him. I nodded, pretended to be tired, and asked him to walk me to my car so I could grab something. Then I drove straight to my cousin's house and changed the code at 2 a.m. I blocked him everywhere, filed a police report. The officer actually nodded when I explained everything and said, "Some people save you because they care, some save you because they want to own you." Sometimes the savior isn't a hero. Sometimes he's just a threat dressed in better lighting. And sometimes the scariest people are the ones who believe they're doing everything out of love, because you can't reason with someone who thinks obsession is devotion. People always assume firefighters are automatic heroes, not just lifesavers, but good people to their core. And honestly, I used to think anyone who runs toward burning buildings must have a heart made of something noble. Turns out, some of them also have a heart made of pure possessiveness, the kind that burns hotter and longer than any fire they put out. 3 years ago, my apartment building caught fire because an idiot upstairs fell asleep with a cigarette. I was on the 3rd floor, trapped in my bedroom, choking on smoke and absolutely convinced I was going to die. I remember clawing at the window frame because the heat on the door was getting unbearable. When the firefighters finally broke in, I don't even remember their faces, just the weight of someone lifting me, the oxygen mask being pressed to my mouth, the feeling of hands that felt firm and safe. One of them stayed with me all the way to the ambulance. He kept his gloved hand on my shoulder, steadying me while I shook uncontrollably. I remember thinking his voice sounded like an anchor in the middle of chaos. His name was Calder. A week after the fire, he showed up at the temporary housing the city set up for displaced residents. He said he just wanted to check on me. "You looked really shaken," he said, giving this soft, concerned expression that made me feel obligated to let him sit with me. I was still in survival mode, so his attention felt comforting. Like the universe sent me a protector. He started visiting once a week, then twice. Then almost every day. He brought food, blankets, fire safety pamphlets, even an air purifier, because the smoke probably messed with your lungs. It felt thoughtful, and I kept telling myself he was just doing his job with a bit of extra kindness. My friends joked that he obviously liked me, that I should just give him a chance. But something felt off, like how he always wanted to know where I was going. How he'd get visibly annoyed if I didn't answer his texts instantly. How he once said, "I just don't want something else to happen to you. I was the one who pulled you out. I can't go through that twice." I brushed it off as trauma talking. When I finally found a new apartment, he offered to help me move. I said no repeatedly, but he showed up anyway early in the morning with a pickup truck and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He insisted that he needed to make sure the place was safe. He walked through the entire unit like an inspector, checking doors, windows, faucets, the fuse box. Then he said, "The neighborhood seems sketchy. I don't like you living here alone." I laughed awkwardly, assuming he was joking. He wasn't. Over the next month, he inserted himself deeper. He'd show up unannounced, just to check on things. He brought me fire extinguishers I didn't ask for. One night, he left a smoke detector outside my door with a note saying, "This one is better than the cheap one you have. Trust me." I started feeling like I needed permission to leave my own apartment. It escalated when I went on a date. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell him. The only person I mentioned it to was my sister that night. While my date and I were walking back to the parking lot, a fire truck rolled by slowly. Too slowly. The cab window rolled down and I saw him Calder, just staring. No wave, no smile, just this cold evaluating gaze like I'd done something wrong. The next morning he texted, "You were out late. Everything okay?" My stomach dropped. There was no way he randomly saw me. I played it cool, but from that moment he became more intense. He hinted that my date was dangerous because the guy's body language looked off. Something he couldn't possibly know unless he'd been following us. The final straw wasn't dramatic, but it was terrifying in its quietness. I came home and found one of my windows cracked open, just a few centimeters. The kind of thing you'd ignore. Except I was obsessive about checking them before leaving. On the kitchen counter was a note. "You forgot to lock one of the windows anyone could have gotten in." I never forgot to lock anything. That night I packed a bag and went to stay with my uncle. I blocked Calder's number. The next morning he showed up at my job asking if I was okay because I wasn't answering. My coworkers thought it was romantic. I saw the edge in his smile, the kind that said, "Don't embarrass me by pulling away." HR had to escort him out. I filed a police report. The officer said something that still rings in my head. Sometimes rescuers get addicted to the role they want you to keep needing them. Calder was never violent, never yelled, never raised a hand, but he stole my sense of safety. One protective gesture at a time, he saved me from a fire. Then he tried to build a life where he was the only one allowed to hold the extinguisher.